I hate army painting. But after 10 months of trying to paint another Warhammer army, I realized some ways that make it faster, more fun, and just not as bad. So if you're painting armies and you want a better experience, that is, make it faster, more fun, and enjoyable, today you'll discover how. But before that, why do some people hate army painting? This is something I mention in pretty much every army painting video. It's very simple. If you wanna finish your army fast, or just be efficient, you gotta paint it in batches. So instead of painting every model one by one, you take a batch of 10 or something and apply all steps on all of them like a machine. It's absolutely soul-sucking and I still hate it even when creating those videos. Some people take it to an extreme and apply all steps across entire army. And to me, that's just mad. I guess it's more efficient, but the experience of doing the same thing over and over again to see barely any progress in a few hours, yeah, that's not for me. And see, that's the reason why I do like display painting. When painting a single miniature, you can see the progress immediately, and it's very rewarding to keep going. But on an army, you really don't get that. And if you like display painting yourself and you like improving, join my newsletter where I talk about that. I share extra content to level up your painting, so check the link in the description. So when I say in the videos that I would much rather paint a single display piece, that's exactly why. It's much more motivating. But, surprise surprise, we can do something similar when army painting. It's not gonna be that efficient, but it's way more enjoyable to paint smaller batches. Looking back at my army painting series, I probably enjoyed painting my swooping hogs the most. That's not because I like the miniatures, or because of the method I've used, but because I've only painted 5 figures at once. The progress on them was way faster, more rewarding, and motivating. For the other videos, I painted 10 minis and suffered because of that. If I have to sacrifice efficiency to make the process more enjoyable, that's a trade-off I am willing to make. And this raises a question. What is the best size of your batch? The most enjoyable way to paint is 1 by 1, but holy shit, that would take forever. So for me, I say anything from 3 to 5 minis at one time is the best. However, it completely depends on the miniatures. Generally speaking, the more elements a figure has, the longer it takes to paint. So if you paint like a Space Marine or a Stormcast Eternal, probably painting 3 of them would be ideal. But I understand that 3 figures don't usually form a full squad. On the other side of the spectrum, if you're painting minis that are simple and don't have too many features, you can do more. Again, it's not about how big the miniature is, but how many elements they have, because that'll make the process longer. Since the swooping hogs were painted in a batch of 5, I got to enjoy it so much that I was motivated to push them further. So despite me not liking the miniatures as much as the warp spiders, for example, I had so much fun that I put more effort into them. Now, I wanna talk about the biggest hack I learned from my army painting series. You see, at the start of 2025 I decided to start Eldar, which coincided with their new plastic releases. But that wasn't the reason for picking them. The reason why I chose Eldar is because their units have different color schemes. And sure, you can do that with any army, but this is lore accurate, and that makes me happy. So if you dread the outlook of using the same colors for 100 minis, this is a great solution. Some more examples of armies that are begging for varied colors are Gloomspite Gids because they combine squigs, trolls, wolves, and spiders. Drukhari with their sub-factions. Necrons with different metals. Or Chaos Space Marines and Slaves to Darkness to have different warbands. Again, you can do this with any army if you really want to, but there is one thing you should do to make them look coherent. And that's to have the same bases. You can have crazy different colors, but as long as they are in the same environment, it'll work together. And speaking of bases, that's another thing. Luckily, the Eldar I painted so far actually have a decent basing solution baked in. Not all of them, but many of them do have some kind of tactical rocks or ruins. To keep it consistent, I wrote down the exact color recipe, and that way all of them look coherent, even though they are painted months apart. On top of that, you can always do the most simple thing, especially for army painting. So any rocks, random scatter, tufts and dry pigment will work wonders. When army painting, you don't even have to have anything elaborate. But if you want something fancy, for the love of God, plan it ahead. It can be as simple as buying extra bits or 3D print them. This can be random bullshit like plants, ruins, pillars, barrels, candles, mushrooms, or anything you want really. That way, whenever you are done painting, you can just glue it on, paint it, and bam, you're finished. Now, I've mentioned 3D printing, and this touches on another subject. You see, I always say that if there is something worse than army painting, it's army assembly. But if you 3D print your models, you don't have to assemble them, or even clean the mold lines. I don't want to get into 3D printing too much, and I also do like the original GW models anyway. Still, it's true that I don't like assembling them. So this particular tip is for you if you find yourself in the same situation. If you don't like building models, but you still like painting them, just outsource it! Yay! Whenever I do that, there are usually gaps and sometimes even mold lines. But for my army, I can tolerate a bit of that. At least, I don't have to do it. And just like that, you can spend your precious time on the fun part, which is painting. Okay, let's talk about a way that'll get you a completely finished army faster than anything else. And this has nothing to do with painting. By the nature of Warhammer, you need various models to play a game. But not all models are equal. Painting the 2 wave serpents with sponging, my army grew over 200 points in no time. Not only was it faster than painting the swooping hawks, but together they cost 2 times the amount of points. So this tip is more of an army composition tip, but if you are genuinely all about gaming and wanna start ASAP, it's worth it. Taken to the extreme, you can paint just a few models by picking Imperial Knights. But let's just say that you still wanna play more classic army. Well, in that case, you could consider including more vehicles or a centerpiece model. Most armies have one and they cost plenty of points, so you paint less models in total. Personally, I don't like painting vehicles as much, but the centerpieces are definitely enjoyable to paint. For example, a single Primarch can be around 20% of your army, and those models are dope. In Age of Sigmar, you have really cool beasts or epic heroes to lead your army. The point is, if you don't want to paint hundreds of the same models, paint an elite army or include pieces that take up a lot of points. Furthermore, it's those vehicles where you can save a lot of time by airbrushing them or using colored rattle cans. Usually, when you paint any given miniature, you optimize between speed and quality. Of course, you can pick a method where the miniature looks good and you don't spend eternity on it. After all, that's what my army painting series is about. After trying all the different techniques, it's clear that the more time you spend on a model, the better it is. Not very surprising, right? And it's up to you where you wanna stop. So if you feel like it takes too long to paint an army, just lower your standard! Actually, do you know why so many people are single? Because their standards are too f***ing high! Anyway, this is the reason why it's so important to test things out. Take one model, paint it fully, see how long it takes, and consider if it's worth the effort. If not, you can always make it less good. These days, I really don't like spending too much time on an army, especially when I have too many other awesome minis to paint already. That means even using something like a dipping can is not out of the question. Everything mentioned so far had an important subtext. When I talked about the badges, varied color schemes, painting interesting display pieces, or even lowering your standards, these are the things you can do to suffer less and enjoy the process more. But one mindset can be just as powerful. Paint just to paint. Not to have a finished army, but just to enjoy the act of putting paint on plastic. Because if you are only chasing the outcome, it's really hard to enjoy the journey. And I know that this might be really hard, because at the end of the day, you do want that finished army. However, if you try to like the process, you'll most likely stick to it, which means you'll also get more models painted. And if you wanna enjoy painting more, recently I covered a way to paint better without learning a gajillion different techniques, so check it out. And see you there!